I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
General's Report A/76/235 and acknowledge the assistance extended by the UN to member states at their request in promoting the rule of law. The progression of the rule of law at the national level is an essential component for good governance and sustainable development. The continuous strengthening of the rule of law is our common responsibility. The principles of the rule of law, and that is equality, equity, inclusion, rights, laws, and strong institutions, are ingrained in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and particularly in SDG 16, that aims to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. The Constitution of Sri Lanka, Madam President, has extensive provisions on fundamental rights. These provisions have contributed to the promotion and protection of our citizenry, inclusive of child rights, the empowerment of women, and the protection of the different ethnic communities in the country. In addition, there are a number of personal laws related to the ethnic communities that are given effect to through the judicial system. Sri Lanka reiterates its commitment to promoting and ensuring the rule of law at all levels. Madam Chair, it is appropriate, I thought, that I recall what former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan had said in this regard. Quote, "The rule of law," he said, "refers to a principle of governance in which all persons, institutions, and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated, and which are consistent with international human rights norms and standards." He said it requires as well measures to ensure adherence to the principles of the supremacy of the law, equality before the law, accountability to the law, fairness in the application of the law, separation of powers, participation in decision-making, legal certainty, avoidance of arbitrariness, and procedural and legal transparency. Close quotes. Madam Chair, the rule of law is a force entirely for the good and which advances the democracy, properly so called, and also just common humanity and human dignity. The rule of law is not just another phrase, but has gained a settled meaning, although it may not have gained a perfect definition, that if we were to consider it, we would see a workable, practical objective which can be achieved and suggests that those parts are not only procedural but substantive. The rule of law is not the exclusive domain, of course, of the Western world, but is of universal application, which has gained much currency in contrast to other high-flown concepts such as human rights or democracy. Madam Chair, permit me to quote the words of Lord Bingham, a famous law lord from England, who said, quote, "All persons and authorities within the state, whether public or private, should be bound by, entitled to the benefits of laws publicly made, taking effect generally in the future, and publicly administered in the courts." This easy definition, however, captures a number of features of a state which respects the rule of law. Members of the public are expected to comply with the law. Public officials are not expected to exceed their powers and are expected to apply the law equally. It provides for access to justice in order to claim the benefit of the law and the assurance that the courts are fair and impartial. Madam Chair, as much as this definition summarizes the ingredients in a particular way, it also brings home a perfect message. What it simply says is that the law must be accessible. What it simply means that it must be easily understood. It must be clear. It must be predictable. Legal rights must be decided having regard to law and not discretion. Any power must be exercised lawfully, fairly, and reasonably. There must be equality before the law. Human rights must be respected. trials must be fair, and states must comply with their obligations in international as well as national laws. Sri Lanka remains concerned, Madam Chair, about the dangers and threats posed by actions of various entities that seek to seriously undermine international law and the rule of law. It is absolutely essential, I say, that the rule of law is adhered to by both member states and international organizations. We must ensure that the actions of international organizations are also consonant with the rule of law. Even some of our own entities endeavor to go to many lengths and seek financial provision to collect, consolidate, analyze and preserve information and evidence as to develop possible strategies for future accountability purposes. Where, we ask, is the fairness in the application of the law? Is there procedural legal transparency in such process? Are there processes avoiding arbitrariness? Is there equality before the law? If so, why, I ask, are such instances being applied in a selective manner to selective countries? Why isn't it applicable to all countries? I ask, Madam Chair, where is the balance in the international dimension of the rule of law under such circumstances? In conclusion, Madam Chair, Sri Lanka will continue nonetheless in its efforts to reinforce the rule of law within its domestic legal system and looks forward to contributing proactively and decisively to efforts to strengthen the rule of law at the international level. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka. I now give the floor to the distinguished